What's up, good movie lovers? Welcome to a movie night for the original Red Dawn.
I review movie previews.
We all know that Hollywood, aka StoryCorp, has been in a remake frenzy for the last 10 years or so, and now it's time for the peaceful afterlife rest of 80s action movies to be disturbed, because it means almost guaranteed box office for the profit-hungry, new project, original idea, fearful Hollywood. There's nothing wrong with remakes, reboots, or sequels as long as there's passion and creativity behind them. But watching the previews for the new Red Dawn, do we feel like the effort has been put in? 28 years ago, the world was a very different place. The political climate was one of East versus West, of Russia versus America. And from that, in 1984, was born the surprise action blockbuster hit, Red Dawn. Why did it work? Why did it catch on? And why did people seem to respond to that? That's what this movie night's all about, as well as exploring the reasons why the remake exists. If you've never listened to a movie night before, it's basically a critic's audio commentary. And the way it works is that you on your end have a copy of the film, whether it's on DVD, Blu-ray, or streaming, and we sync the video and the audio up, and then we hang out for an analysis of the film. Throughout the commentary, I'll be mentioning the time code so that we stay in sync, and there could be long pauses where I'm not speaking at all. This means that there's no problems in the audio, and it's just me gathering thoughts. This could last for 10 to 30 to 60 seconds, so don't be alarmed. For now, go ahead and queue up your copy of Red Dawn, and press pause as the studio logo is coming up. Let's meet up after the film, after our analysis, for some closing thoughts. And now, let's begin our journey for one of the iconic films of the 80s. In 3, 2, 1. To understand why a remake titled Red Dawn makes no sense for today's age, we have to really go back to the 80s, to 1984, and understand what was going on at that time and what inspired the creation of this film. First, let's give credit to the filmmakers and the composer here for just starting this movie off, boom, getting us right into the story. NATO dissolves, United States stands alone. 35 seconds. Great score by Basil Poledouris, a forgotten composer of films from the 70s and 80s. His big hits include Red Dawn, RoboCop, and Conan the Barbarian. He does a really great job of capturing the foreboding nature of what's to happen at this point in the story, but throughout the film, he manifests that emotion of patriotism, of banding together, of fighting for your ideals, for your country, for each other. And as these teenagers are battling against a trained army, against the armies of oppression, of evil Russia, communist Russia, we root for them. This music brings that out of us in the audience and out of the characters. And this is definitely a film in 1984 that you could start cheering USA, USA while you're watching it. One minute, 47 seconds. The director and writer of this movie's name comes up, John Milius. He's kind of been forgotten about. He stopped really being active in the film community in the early 90s, but from the late 70s through the 80s, his creative influence was tied to a lot of big hits: Dirty Harry, Magnum Force, Jaws, Apocalypse Now, and as writer-director, back-to-back Conan the Barbarian and Red Dawn. Here, he went on to help write Hunt for Red October, Geronimo, Clear and Present Danger. The man knows what makes for good storytelling. It's always character-based. And in this case, it's hitting upon that tension in the air. The notion that something was going on in the mid-80s, that the battle, the Cold War that had been going on for 40 years, since 1945, the end of World War II, was going to come to a head. The end was near, and you could just kind of feel it in the air, and whether that was going to be nuclear fallout as explored in The Day After Tomorrow, or if it was going to be one side winning out it was palpable. It was going on. And right around this time, you have that patriotism really coming through in a lot of films. The next year we have Rocky Part 4, which the ultimate representative of America being Rocky Balboa goes to Russia, takes on Dolph Lundgren. He's not a man. He's a piece of iron. The forged warrior of the USSR, and takes him down and has his speech at the end. So Rocky IV, again, a very patriotic film. It's in the air, it's coming out, and Red Dawn really just captures that spirit and deals with it in a very fun, fictional universe kind of way. Speculative fiction, the whole notion of what if this would have happened. There's an author by the name of Harry Turtledove who does a lot of this kind of stuff. Philip K. Dick also did a story or two about what if history would have went one way or the other, and what would that future have looked like if Germany had won World War II, if America was too late in developing the atomic bomb. Four minutes, 30 seconds as the teacher is giving his lecture for the day, Genghis Khan, and invading and fighting a war. It references the action that's about to take place. We do get a shot of all the students in the classroom, specifically the up-and-coming stars of the day. This is one of those films like The Outsiders, like The Breakfast Club, that has a cast of actors who are going to go on to have great individual careers. We know the term Brat Pack for that group of actors that always appeared together. Rob Lowe, Demi Moore, Emilio Estevez, Charlie Sheen, C. Thomas Howell. C. Thomas Howell and Patrick Swayze are on screen again here. They were in The Outsiders together, and this would be the first appearance of Johnny and Baby from Dirty Dancing, which will be 3 years after this. Jennifer Grey and Patrick Swayze meet in this film. This film, again, just gets the story moving. 5 minutes, 55 seconds. The school's being attacked. This isn't just some kind of army drill. The teacher's been killed. It's really interesting because watching this movie in 1984 as an 8-year-old and hanging out with kids my age, a couple years older, after having seen it, there was a lot of discussion in the playground or just hanging out saying, what would you do? I'd totally be fighting the Russians. It really allowed you to imagine yourself in this situation. It's just a fun idea in terms of average American kid, average kid anywhere. It doesn't necessarily have to be American-centric. It just is in the story here. But the notion of, do you have that heroism within you? Are you willing, like the statue of Teddy Roosevelt that they start with in the film here, to have that Rough Rider courage, to do what's necessary, to be tough enough to withstand something as horrible as an attack on your country? The music, again, really great job of amplifying the emotions, on playing the emotions of the characters and on our emotions. Great shot here, 7 minutes, 28 seconds, as this character is trying to catch them. The character's father is chasing after him, and the friends are holding his son back from jumping out of the truck, and the army figures just capture him. It's very dark, it's very odd in terms of the emotions that it's starting to convey in us. This is something that was absolutely impossible for us to consider in 1984, that America would be able to be invaded like this. And in the background, these are all practical effects. It's always exciting to see practical effects used. It just has that immediacy to it. Cue the explosions in the distance, you just get the sense of the chaos, that there's this war going on. It's starting out. You don't know what's going on, who's attacking us. Unfortunately, we do have a reference point for this now because of 9/11. And that's an element that we have to consider when thinking about a remake. Eight minutes, 45 seconds. This kind of harkens back to Dawn of the Dead almost. Every one of us have that kind of fantasy of going through a store or mall and just being able to take whatever we want. Especially back in the 80s, there were a lot of prizes that you can win in the mall. With the 60s and 70s creating this mall structure, this mentality of going store to store, continuing in the 80s, the notion of winning a shopping spree for 30 minutes or 1 hour or whatever the time frame or whatever the amount, $5,000 shopping spree. Here it's shopping spree because of chaos, but we all have these imaginings of what would we do living in a mall or taking it over, kind of like the survivors of the zombie apocalypse in Dawn of the Dead, or in this case, World War III is starting, and now it's time to just get the survival tools together and get out there into the mountains and try to survive. Totally logical that they don't go and try to fight the army, obviously. They go off and try to survive. Why is this being remade today? It was created because it manifested in a physical form on screen the tensions, the worries, the what-ifs that were going on in the mid-80s. There was a very real fear that the world was going to blow itself up, that something would go wrong, one side would misinterpret the other side's actions, the mythical notion of the president or the Soviet premier having their finger on the button, and all they need to do is push that red button and the missiles start their launching sequence and we can't go back and we're going to destroy each other. That notion was a very real fear. Waking up every morning and just hearing about it on the news, the latest reports, the latest movement in troop location, the tensions were super high. At this point in the 80s, Russia was having their Vietnam, which would be their invasion and occupation of Afghanistan. It was a global positioning battle for territory. Who had more control of the world and influenced their ideas upon it? And at one point, the Soviet Union had a greater population than the United States and the world of democracy. Love the practicality here. 11 minutes, 35 seconds. Yeah, just piss in the radiator. This film keeps it real. They show the blood. They make characters face tough decisions and go through them, and it doesn't really shy away from them. Again, practical effects here. Love it. Helicopter, tanks. They take over a small town. "11 minutes, 58 seconds. Shops being blown up, missiles being launched. It's a little bit funny in the sense that these troops take over just a small town, probably because of budget factors and lack of willingness to finance a project that wasn't guaranteed to make a lot of money. Smaller locations had to be built, and a smaller story dealing with a core group of characters who escape and then occasionally go back and fight these troops with the bigger tanks and items that might require more money to make it believable on film that there's actually a war and counterattack going on. In a remake today, that would be the only factor that would be a positive, that the story could take place on a larger scale. What if America was invaded and it was New York or Los Angeles, Atlanta, Chicago, one of the bigger cities in the United States that had to repel this invasion. That might be a little more fun to see, but at this point, we've had alien invasions of every city on screen. Is it really going to be that different? The terror of it is the fear that the safety of our homeland, where we live, where we do our day-to-day activities, is vulnerable. This is super fiction for America in 1984. There's no way this could happen. Film and fiction is there to explore the possibilities of human existence. So this is a movie that asks, what if it happened? And what if it happened to some ordinary kids, some ordinary people? How would it look? How would it unfold? And at 13 minutes, 50 seconds, we get the tough answers. And I love it's not glamorizing anything. It's playing everything very straight. This is a hardcore drama. It's a drama first, then it's an action war movie second. Any genre should always be drama plus genre. Play it for the human emotions, for what the expectations of the genre are. Add that to those emotions. And usually you get movies that stand the test of time, that touch us emotionally and leave a mark in our memories, and we go back to and watch them again. Originally, this was supposed to be played more as a Lord of the Flies sort of idea, where after they leave their town, it becomes an exploration of the nature of humanity amongst a group of people wanting to survive. But some commercial feedback was given, and it was decided that it should be the survivors fighting against the invading forces. And let's thank those commercial forces, the commercial influence, for having been voiced here, because it's a really great addition. There's an absolute benefit to a nice balance of commercialism and artistic inspiration in movies. When it really comes together, it can be the best filmmaking that there is on the planet. Too much art can equal pretension, and too much commercialism is just superficiality. So there needs to be the fun of the commercial nature, and then that creativity, the artistic kind of, let's call it purity if you want to say that, coming together and making something fun, but making it also have depth to it. That's the nature of it. And this movie works because of that. Here we get the scene at 15 minutes, 45 seconds. The first fight amongst the group. This is basically like Law of the Jungle. We have a pack of wolves. They've never been together as a pack before, and they have to determine who the alpha male will be. We have voicing of opinions, and then once the two strongest opinions clash, it comes down to a physical battle, and Patrick Swayze wins, the ex-quarterback of the high school, his brother being Charlie Sheen in this scene. And as everyone has witnessed, the alpha male win the fight, become the pack master. One by one they come over and give their allegiance to him. Though you get the sense, there's that shot right there, it's the character looking back and forth not knowing who to choose, and it's eventually decided reluctantly that they're going to follow him. And the would-be challenger to the Packmaster in the distance. It's a great shot. Patrick Swayze in the foreground, the loser in the background. You get the sense that he's not going to be happy, and he still has his own ideals. And later we're going to know, and we're going to see that he becomes a traitor. And in a gut-wrenching scene, they take him out. So this movie, again, does not shy away from the horrors of war and tough decisions. So he eventually comes over and shakes a hand. So a nice primal, animalistic kind of moment there. It's decided who the leader is, and now what are we going to do? We're going to survive. We can hunt, we can fish. The character here is verbalizing everything that we in the audience are wondering. How are these kids going to survive? Well, their father's been taking them up here all their lives. They know the terrain. They know what to do. Cut to October, 17 minutes, 40 seconds. We started September. It's October. The guns, the bombs, not really going off. Great shots of nature here. We notice the peacefulness of the terrain, that it almost seems unreal that World War III has started. And we keep the character focused. Again, we're not going to the big city for all the easy genre set pieces, the would-be set pieces of buildings crumbling and chases through the streets. This is very much, again, focused on the characters. We have them disguising themselves, camouflaging themselves with some branches, some shrubbery. And this is a nice symbolic moment here where they have their first kill, and they're going to have to drink the deer blood. As a young kid watching this, it was a very bizarre notion, but there's also something, again, primal. This movie really returns these kids to their roots of just pure survival. It stripped away civilization for them, and now it basically, you could imagine watching this, and they're kind of in the, take the leather jackets away and the denim jeans, and just put them in that warrior kind of clothing, that warrior mode of survival. Don't even have them speaking English, just grunting. Could be like Clan of the Cave Bear, or one of those films where we follow the cavemen and our human ancestors just hunting and trying to survive. Here we have an initiation ritual. Anytime you watch any kind of initiation ritual, whether it's in something like The Matrix or Star Wars, or West Side Story, the warriors joining a gang, joining the armed forces, whatever it is, there's always some kind of initiation ritual. His blood is yours. The connection there, the returning to nature in a lot of ways. And that was one of the voiced fears, the voiced predictions that after World War III, this is what would happen. We'd go back to hunter-gatherers, just surviving hand to mouth, one kill to the next. Red Dawn in 2012. The title should not be Red. Something Dawn. The reason for that is that there really is no fear of any kind of communist threat. Cold War is over, and technically the opponent, the force that was to be invading America in the original idea of the remake, was going to be China, and China has been communist for a long time. It's a morphed version of communism. It's a capitalistic communism. By no means do we have the same tensions, the same fear. The whole idea, again, the notion being that the missiles could launch at any time. Nuclear war. That was going to be World War III. Nuclear war, destruction of everything. That's gone. Red, direct reference to the USSR, to Russia. That's been done with since 1989. It's faded away. Even the James Bond movies don't reference it anymore. So just change the title. Why not just make a movie about somebody invading the USA? If there was any film with this kind of notion that should be remade today, it would be the Chuck Norris film from 1985, Invasion USA, which is obviously exists because of the success of Red Dawn. It was a surprise hit. It was a huge box office grosser for that time, and it was also one of the bloodiest movies ever. Its violence was actually recorded in the Guinness Book of World Records. Do a search and find out the exact details, but it was something crazy like someone gets shot or killed an average of every 20 or 30 seconds in this. We're watching it here, 21 minutes, 45 seconds. There really hasn't been a lot of death going on, but as they start engaging the forces here, and especially towards the end, the body count just starts racking up. And then when you average that out over the course of the film, it becomes X amount of deaths per second. But it really just starts intensifying from the middle of the movie to the end. Here they're exploring, they're finding out what's going on. And this is cool. We jump to a month later, and now we in the audience are just totally interested. Okay, what would this look like? What would occupation look like? Well, it probably would look like with what was going on in Germany at the time, where Germany became split, of course, by the Berlin Wall, the symbolic representation of the Cold War. And once that came down, the effect was that the Cold War was going to end. Half of Germany is free, half of it isn't. And this is kind of what it would look like. And they're going around trying to find out what's going on, seeing people that they know. And here's a good scene here. "22 minutes, 52 seconds, where they're in the shop, and they find out a little bit of information. We, too, are in the same spot as these main characters. We don't know any more than they do, and that's going to continue to happen through the rest of the film. That's a choice as a filmmaker, as a writer. Where do you want us, the audience, to be? We're going to be with them on the journey step for step. We're not going to know anything. That really creates a stronger connection. Invasion USA has a very chillingly relevant storyline to 2012. Made in 1985, the idea was that terrorists invaded USA and started committing random acts of violence. There are some really extreme scenes in that. They're done in a cheesy manner. The budget was low, and what it had to be better than, meaning that the films that had come before it really hadn't set a standard in terms of that idea. Invasion USA was a pretty new idea at the time. Again, Red Dawn coming right before it. There are a few films throughout the history of cinema that kind of play on that idea, but don't visualize it to this extent. Red Dawn, Invasion USA really try to expand the territory and give us a bigger picture. And while there's a lot of laughable moments in Invasion USA, not so much here in Red Dawn. Red Dawn's played, again, more from an emotional point of view. It's a drama first. This scene here really is pretty gut-wrenching. "24 minutes, 45 seconds as the boys go to the makeshift camp, the prisoner camp, and they're asking if they can see their father. The interaction between the boys and the father really gets to you. Really can make you well up with emotion and just kind of think, well, if I was in that situation, my dad's behind that fence, I'm on the other side, how would I feel? And he says, don't cry anymore. Later on, Swayze's going to be telling them not to cry when they realize what's going on. And great line coming up here as they walk away. Avenge me! Avenge me, boys! It's played from a straight emotional point of view, and it becomes a memorable line in the film because of that. It's not done with a wink to the camera saying this is going to be a cool one-liner, an action movie cliche. It works in the moment, it's true in the moment, and that's the reason it sticks with us, because it kind of summarizes what's going on in the movie thus far. And this scene is about them finding out that the life they knew is gone, that the rules have changed, and that they're going to have to become men ahead of schedule. And they're going to have to do it on their own. They're not going to have that father figure, the elder leader of the clan, to steer them in the right direction. We get a nice moment here when the father talks about, you were all so damn little, you're growing up so fast, I remember it all. I'm not going to be around to pick you up when you fall now. Great notions here. Patrick Swayze giving a good performance. Charlie Sheen. The tearing up is working, grabbing onto the fence. It's all really played well. And this is the scene that connects us strongly with these characters. This is a window character moment, a confession cam moment. We have access to the characters' inner workings. We're gaining entry into their spirits, their souls, their desires, their fears. We know what's making them tick. We know what's affecting them. So later, when they transform themselves into the Wolverines and they start fighting against the forces that have killed their parents and their friends and the people they knew, innocent people, we're going to be rooting for them because we had this scene. Hopefully in the remake, there's going to be moments like this because we need to root any kind of kinetic action, any kind of drastic, violent action. We need that justified. We only cheer for something like that when we know what the importance of it is. Just like the WWE or any boxing match or MMA, these sporting events, when these fights take place, we always get the behind-the-scenes interview. Before the fight, what do you think about your opponent? How do you feel going in? And each person gives their perspective on what they think, how they're feeling, what they want. And we get a sense of their personalities, and we can choose who to root for. It's a basic requirement of any confrontational situation. So if you're setting up a boxing match or a wrestling fight, give us the personalities, give us the storyline, let us know why they're mad at each other. They were once a feared tag team, but one man betrayed the other, and now they're seeking revenge in this head-to-head fight. That's the stuff we want. Develop the personality so we get to choose the person that we most relate to, that we feel connected with, and we're going to root for them, and the fight will be that much more interesting. Instead of just imagine yourself as like an alien that happens to land the day of a huge boxing match, the Thrilla in Manila, and just kind of sits down in the front row and turns to the person next to him and says, "Oh, what's going on? Why are these guys fighting? Who are these guys?" If you don't know the whole story, Muhammad Ali, that whole background, the years, the career, all of it that's been played up, Howard Cosell giving his thoughts on the fight and what it means. If you don't know that, you're going to lose a lot. You'll see it as just a physical altercation, but it's not really going to impact you as an audience member unless you have that connection to the people that are fighting, that are in the ring, throwing the blows, and taking the hits. Now, scene to scene, 30 minutes, 7 seconds, we get the next emotional moment. More sort of window character moments. We're getting some story in terms of, okay, tell us what's going on. What's up with this war? How far along are we? What's the status? What's America looking like? Who's going to win? And we're getting some supplies, but then we're also getting, oh, I know you, and how's my father? Some more emotional moments there. And as we find out that the boy's dad has been killed, we get a nice emotional reaction, some good shots here. Milius knows where to put the camera. There's going to be some really great shots coming up later. Some that have stuck with me as just a movie fan in terms of moments that really tear you up inside and capture what's going on. Here, Russians found some guns missing. So as the guns that these guys took from that gas station earlier allowed them to survive, the Russians punished his father for supporting guerrillas, as they called him, and they killed his son. Made him an example. 31 minutes, 13 seconds. You boys listen to me and let that burn in real good. I don't know where your mother is, Robert. I got nobody now. And allowing him as a boy, as a kid, who hasn't really grown up yet, to just feel the loss of that and just have it be in the background as he's crying as we cut to the other shots here, the two shots, and we don't see him on screen for a moment there. Patrick Swayze breaking up and defending it. He didn't do anything wrong. He was innocent. And now adding a little femininity to the mix here. It's very masculine right now. And now we need to have some kind of nurturing energy of the females. Leah Thompson and Jennifer Grey. Leah Thompson, of course, will be in Back to the Future. So there's a lot of young Hollywood stars that would, again, become popular in the 80s here. I don't want to know what they're going. Take care of them. Bye, Grandpa. We get the horses, so the whole Teddy Roosevelt Rough Riders thing coming into play, and returning to the basics, returning to the pre-industrial, pre-machine, pre-technology that man could use against himself to blow everything up. Good luck, son. It's almost like it's the Wild Wild West kind of saying goodbye. Passing the reins over to the action movie of the 80s in some sense. So how does this work in 2012? It's not going to be China anymore because reports had surfaced after the film was made in 2009 that it was China as the enemy, and the backlash and corporate Financial considerations have revamped the enemy to be North Korea. Now let's ask ourselves, does anyone really fear an invasion from North Korea? Not really. But do we fear random acts of terrorism? The answer is yes. After 9/11, we still feel uneasy. We still feel vulnerable. There have been a number of terrorist acts that have been stopped. There's always a sense that things haven't been secured totally, and maybe won't ever be that secure again. The notion of a protected by itself in the world United States is gone, and at any moment we have in the back of our minds that fear that something bad can happen again, which is why Invasion USA would have been a film to remake. Its premise is scary. It is more scary now. Watching the cheesy Chuck Norris Invasion USA from 1985, while it's absolutely a Mystery Science Theater worthy, make fun of every moment movie, there are some chilling scenes and ideas in it. And if that movie were to play and to be remade today, it probably wouldn't be a commercial success because it would really freak us out. It would make us totally uneasy. And with the CGI and the budget that could be given to that type of film with that idea, it really wouldn't be a fun film to watch. Red Dawn was a fun film because even though the tensions were high, there was really never a fear that a force would come over and invade. World War III and the whole tension that we had between Russia and the United States all came down to the notion of blowing ourselves up with nuclear weapons. It was never, oh, they're going to send a bunch of planes over here filled with dudes and with parachutes. They're going to jump out and, take over a small town or whatever, invade the USA. That was never, ever a major concern. It was fun to just see the idea played out on screen. And even though there is room in filmmaking for movies and stories that explore current social issues, political issues, the tough times a country, a culture finds itself in, it has to be done in such a way that we don't really leave a movie feeling worse than we came in. We tend to go to movies to escape, to be entertained based on the genres, and we like our movies to end happier than sadder. Occasionally downer endings can work, but they really have to be carefully orchestrated so that it's not a total downer. Those films, they do exist, and they're made because they know, okay, this is something that a filmmaker wants to get out, wants to explore. Requiem for a Dream, for example, is not going to make $300 million. It has its core audience. It lets Hollywood know that Darren Aronofsky is a good filmmaker and a daring filmmaker, but it's not going to be a movie that is a blockbuster. The subject material is just going to dictate that in the way that it's explored. It's a tricky area to include these post 9/11 terrorism fears in a movie like this. It would be the authentic thing to do, it would be the daring, the risky thing to do, but would it be the commercial thing to do? Could it be done in a commercial way? Absolutely. But just the idea of it is fearful enough to a business, to a studio that says the idea here is to attract people to check a movie out, that it's too much of a risk to undertake. And remaking a movie that made a lot of money using the same title and just spinning it a little bit so it's North Korea instead of Russia, but essentially following the same beats and sequences, the same quote-unquote plot points, is a safe bet. 38 minutes, 35 seconds. This is the scene I remember most from this movie growing up. The shot right here, 38 minutes, 40 seconds. The young Russian officer. It just holds on him for 5, 6, 7 seconds as he's looking at the gun. And we get the sense that he's this innocent young kid, not much different than them, just in a bad situation. One shot that was missing would have been a close-up on Patrick Swayze. It should have cut from the Russian to Swayze in more of a close-up and gave equal weight because it's something neither of them want to experience. Patrick Swayze is being forced into it. Notice that he hesitates. There's no joy in taking out this human life. It's different than shooting a deer. Though as this character here is sawing off the shotgun, he's kind of getting into the notion of fighting and killing the enemy. One of the worries in the 80s was that because violence in action movies had become such a popular thing, such a glorified thing, every movie tried to one-up the next one. Rambo 2 being a movie that takes the whole idea of action film and just fighting the enemy to the next level. Take a look at First Blood, the first Rambo movie, and take a look at the second one. They're only a few years apart. What separates them is not the journey of the character, but the journey of Hollywood and commercialism and the success of the action film through the early 80s. From that first Rambo to the second one, action movies became a little more formulaic, bigger explosions for each one, bigger body count, so that by the time part 2 comes out, it's just balls to the wall, and we're getting huge explosions, just machine guns just mowing down fields of guys. It's really impersonal. Something that this is really good about, Red Dawn does a great job of making the deaths personal. Even here, 40 minutes, 59 seconds, as the Soviet commander, let's just call him the Soviet commander because it's Russia joining with other communist countries. It's a unified effort to attack America here. I like the way that this actor plays the character here. It's a very human portrayal. It's not a cliche, over-the-top, I'm the bad guy, here's how we got to win this war. He's approaching it from a human point of view. And as we witness the dead soldiers wrapped up on that truck, we see the ramifications of the actions, the effects of war. It's either in the first Austin Powers or the second one. I believe it's a deleted scene. You can find it obviously on the DVD or Blu-ray, of one of the henchmen getting killed in Austin Powers, and then the notification of that guy's family that he's died. And it's really funny because it plays against the convention of an action movie, but it really hits upon an important point, that even these guys, even these Star Trek red shirt characters that just kind of carry the weapons and we know they're going to die, even they are three-dimensional characters. They have a family outside of the frame of the movie. "42 minutes, 45 seconds. This gives us hints of World War II. After France was taken over by Germany, there was, of course, the reports of the French collaborators, of the French working with Germany to oppress their own people. In Schindler's List, we have inmates being appointed as security guards to look over other inmates, so you get that sense of, I might survive, I'm above even my fellow prisoners here. There's always the notion of people wanting to survive and the willingness to bend their ideals, their beliefs, in order to keep their hearts beating, while in a lot of ways their souls start to wither. So you kind of have to choose what's more important. This is the scene that really tips the scales for the survivors, for the kids who are going to now become the Wolverines. "43 minutes, 55 seconds. They are going to witness their fathers dying, being killed, and this is right out of World War II. This is the Germans killing innocent Jews, having them dig their own graves, and then falling into it. And as the tracking shot here reveals the characters, we get the father. Really powerful moment here as they start singing the national anthem. A shot of Patrick Swayze and Charlie Sheen's father. It's from the distance, we get the order. And it's a wide shot here because we want to see all of them fall. As a filmmaker, the question is, okay, when do you go close up? When do you go long shot, middle shot? And here it's a long shot because we want to see the impact of the bullets as a whole. All of these characters are falling down, and then we do a close-up of the guns. The mayor of the town reacts, his stomach kind of sick, he puts his hand to his head, but at the same time we don't like him because he's betraying the town. But what is he supposed to do? It's a tough situation. And we cut to 45 minutes, 32 seconds. Something happens. Emotional reaction from the characters. Awesome. That's what has to happen if you're making any kind of dramatically based film. Action, reaction, cause and effect. They all watch their fathers die. And we have hardcore crying. And then as Patrick Swayze's father said, "Don't cry ever again," Charlie Sheen in the background's crying. The alpha male of the group here is taking control. He wants to cry himself, holding it back, turning it into rage, using it against the enemy. They're going to kill us, all of us, and now they have to fight back. So why should we be different? 46 minutes, 20 seconds. They have made the decision to now start the war. And this is when it really becomes an action movie. We've had moments of action, but for 45 minutes, it's really been a drama. This could very much have been set in World War II, and it's just some citizens who managed to escape, and they're just trying to survive. They're trying to hide. There's a lot of death coming up if in the Guinness Book of World Records this had the record for on-screen deaths up to this time. And we're 47 minutes into it, and really not a ton of people have died. We just had all the adults mowed down, but it's not something that happens a lot early in the film. Much like Die Hard, another great action film, the first 30 minutes of that movie is also a drama involving a husband and a wife who are on the verge of divorce. Now they're going to start fighting back. 47 minutes, 32 seconds as the bomb is placed in the tank. It explodes. And then we have the soldiers chasing after her. Really great wide shot here of the field. And then they're hidden. The secret hatches come up and they're mowed down. This is really the montage of them fighting back, the first few early scenes of the tide turning, of them starting to take action. And as more innocent people were about to be killed here, 48 minutes, 40 seconds. There we go. First scream of Wolverines, 48 minutes, 43 seconds. Wolverine. That becomes the signature line of this movie. And it's not something, again, that was done because it was trying to be a signature line. It was done because it worked for the universe, the nature of the story, who the characters are. Within the town that was taken over, Wolverines, the local kind of sports team, the figure. So the captured people of the town could have something to kind of grab onto. Wolverines become the sign of hope. Young kids who manage to band together and fight the enemy. "49 minutes, 30 seconds. Now the body count's really starting to get up there. Grenades drop, machine guns fired, Wolverine graffiti on the walls, on the trucks they've destroyed. We get time skipping again. This movie's really good at just moving forward, like not focusing on minute-to-minute action. It just gives us a big picture right there. It's a montage, again, the very patriotic score, backing up the emotion and getting us really involved and enthusiastic for cheering for these Wolverines, for these kids. And we cut back to the personification of the enemy here, as he says, "I've never seen this before." He's got a mustache, so he's a bad guy, right? And as he's walking, and the rows of bodies are just laid out on the sidewalk. And again, who knew that baby from Dirty Dancing was such a badass? She's just dropping bombs everywhere. And as the action's happening, we have kind of the conversation between the two commanders here, philosophically talking about who the enemy could be. See, it's the same as Afghanistan. We have a mention of that. They'll never stop. Great shot of them in the foreground, and then right in the background, the timing is perfect. The shot is nicely framed for the explosion of the store. "People of America, arise and join the revolution." Nice little touch that once they secured the town, they would start to put up propaganda everywhere and to now engage in mental warfare. Morale is crucial right now. It's 51 minutes, 27 seconds. You'll see how they'll forget about these Wolverines. From a screenplay point of view, we have the main characters. It's an ensemble cast. Not all the characters are developed as well as a singular main character in most movies. We've kind of grouped them together. Basically, they all essentially have the same, let's say, personality and emotional baggage. They all have the different voices. That's an interesting shot here. 52 minutes, 1 second. The enemy, we're watching the enemy hold one of their comrades who's been killed in the explosion and scream out what's going on here. So the decision is made here to give the bad guys, the opposition, enough screen time so that we see their emotional turmoil. We see what they care about, what they're going through. It gives us a little bit of this shade of gray. It brings us into this gray area where it's easy to hate an absolute enemy, an enemy that is inhuman, that doesn't know any decency, an enemy that's pure evil. But when you see the enemy caring about someone, crying and calling out for justice, calling out in pain because of injustice, it changes our minds a little bit, saying, oh, these guys aren't 100% evil. They just have a belief that's different from ours. So what is the humanity? Can we understand our enemy? And so it brings us in the audience into a real tough area as we're watching this, because now, as the enemy's mowed down, do we start to have kind of a weird feeling inside saying, okay, well, you got to kill him, but now it feels that much more tragic that a human life is being lost. It's not just an enemy life. It's not like a video game where you just go through each level. take out the enemy and they fall off screen. It's someone who's a person. That's the real challenge in any kind of storytelling. Make it all human. The best movies are those that put us in an uncomfortable position of relating to both sides of the story, both characters. The use of the seasons here really conveys how the war effort's going, where it starts in the fall and the war initially just kicks off. It seems like everything's fine until, boom, the invasion happens, World War III started. Now we're going to get into winter, into the dark days, into the enemy having more control, into the Wolverines not knowing what they're doing, not being at full strength. But as they start to empower themselves, band together, have a strategy, they start to make some progress, take out the enemy, and these characters, their fate really is determined in the darkest days, the coldest days of winter. Of the other characters survive and move on, so there is a hint that spring and summer will occur. These forces will be defeated, and once again, the whole of America will be free. The war will be won, and what the Wolverines have done will not be in vain. A new character is introduced, a real grown-up, someone with experience. So he informs them on the status of the war, what's going on. They feed him, he joins the group, and they're going to keep attacking. He's mapping out the territory. This is where the first wave of attack happened. How is this going to work in 2012? Going in, this is a movie that takes us by surprise in 1984. We don't really know what to expect, and it's not a marketable name. It's not a remake of something, even though, I believe if you look up Red Dawn, there is something from the 50s, but it's a totally different story. And by 1984, by no means would that have been referenced or used in any kind of way to create some excitement for this film. Red Dawn today is obviously an easy call for the studio to make because the generation that grew up watching it and being part of that generation, just hearing the idea initially brings up a little bit of excitement because, again, as a little kid watching this movie, it's a really kind of dark fantasy that if you were forced into this situation, you envision yourself as a hero, you envision yourself fighting the enemy, and you can really connect with these young kids put in a tough position. Today, how is this made relevant if it's going to be this idea of an invading force from North Korea or even China? We don't fear any invasion from any of these countries. I think both sides have way too many armaments, and there's something called satellites that are just like blanketing the planet, circling the globe, and I'm pretty sure that there's an app on the iPhone or on the Android where you could check to see positioning of enemy troops. The man on the street with an iPhone will be notified at the same time as the White House of any kind of troop movement or weapons launch. Times have changed, and this notion that kids could go hide in the mountains is just ridiculous because you'd think that any kind of invading force has sophisticated technology, unless it's established at the beginning of the movie that there was like an electromagnetic pulse and it short-circuited all technology for a certain area of land for hundreds of miles in each direction. There's no working computers and blah, blah, blah. Maybe it's like that TV show that's coming out right now. I believe it's called Revolution. It's a J.J. Abrams idea where all of a sudden all the electronics, all the technology on the planet no longer works. So essentially we have a technological apocalypse, and instead of zombies, it's Walking Dead, but it's iPhone dead. Phone doesn't work, nothing. All the comforts that we've become accustomed to aren't around, and everyone's fighting for their own survivals. Take a little bit of Walking Dead, mix it with Survivor, the reality TV show, and that's the series, I guess. Throw in some Lost. Maybe there's going to be some ideas about discovering why the electricity went out and who caused it and what it's all about. But really, what would an invasion movie in 2012 look like? One that would make sense and be logical and be different. Do we really want to go see Red Dawn just with new actors and the same thing happening. It's going to be a different town. Obviously, the weapons will be a little more advanced. The budget might be a little bit bigger, so the explosions could be cooler, a little more inventive. But is that what we want? We want the same thing where the parents get captured and the kids go to the fence and avenge me, boy. And then they get the horses and the guy gives them the granddaughters. And we cut to the bad generals and they're looking over the dead soldiers saying, who are these Wolverines? Essentially, we're just going to the theater because we want to see somebody scream Wolverines again. Hasn't it become kind of just blah after Family Guy's done it? If Family Guy makes fun of something, isn't it pretty much over? Shouldn't we just appreciate the nostalgia and just say, let's move on? As a human race, we've been able to create so much. Can't we just use our creativity and think of something else? No, because as a business, Hollywood needs box office to survive. The nourishment is box office dollars. And in tough economic times when investing $10 to $50 to $100 million into something, $200 million occasionally, means potentially going bankrupt or taking a big hit, it's much easier to play the safe bet and to search movies of the last 30 years by box office results, pick the top 100 and say, okay, let's remake these, even if they're only 5 years old. Let's just keep making the same titles over because we, the audience, are familiar with them. We can recognize them, promise some kind of twist, give us a hot actor, someone who's popular at the time, and we're going to be willing enough to go check it out and pay the same money we did before to get the same story. What makes Red Dawn fun and memorable is something like this here. 1 hour, 1 minute, 15 seconds. We have the carving of the names on the rock. They will forever be immortalized for their heroism. They died being heroes. They died sacrificing themselves for a greater good. It's moments like this that make us connect with this film more. As much as a character standing up and shooting a machine gun at a super huge helicopter that's got missiles and machine guns on it is kind of an inspiring, although it's a foolish act of bravery. It's something we remember. The inventive ways that these young kids outsmart a trained army. Again, as an action movie cliche, that might be the only thing here that's a little bit annoying, is that really these kids are able to outsmart trained military guys. But that plays on the notion of any invading force is always less motivated than the guerrillas, the homegrown citizens who have an emotional investment, a personal desire, and a passion to defend their home territory. It's the lessons of Vietnam and Afghanistan. An invading force always has a tougher time because they're essentially against their will. They're there out of duty, but if it's not a passionate duty, if it's not something that they believe in their hearts, it's just going to be like going to a job that you don't like. Yeah, it pays the bills, and I just want to survive it Monday through Friday so I can have some fun Saturday and Sunday. You're willing to give up 5 days of your life so you can live 2 days of it. Can that be explored? Can this new movie somehow take the ideas and the inspiration of this one, take a look at 2012, make it believable, because even though this was a stretch in terms of the fiction of an invading force, it was still real enough. It was still in the back of our minds that, okay, it's probably going to be nuclear weapons, but tensions are high, and this might happen. And just to see our greatest fears somehow explored on screen, and by exploring them, we dissipate them. When we fear something and we keep running from it, it only gains strength. So the moment we turn around, face it, and go through it, we come out the other side saying, okay, that wasn't so horrible, or, oh, I'll be able to deal with it. This is a way in a fictional manner to say, okay, this is possibly how something could happen. Now, it's unrealistic that a bunch of 15-year-olds would be able to take out a trained army, but it's fun to watch on screen, and the emotion of the patriotism, the emotion of the fighting, that is real. That sticks with us. One hour, 4 minutes, 30 seconds. I love how the dude throws the grenade in the plane, and the pilot's just like, okay, I'm still going to try to take off. Like, the look on his face is like, how about you just, like, pull the ejector seat? Didn't John McClane do that in Die Hard 2? Eject yourself out of there. This is probably one of the most expensive effects in the film. They attack the base and set everyone free, give them guns. Children did not do this. What rebels? They're bandits. More killing of citizens as a result of the Wolverines' actions. Now, this is where the commercialism comes in. The whole thing of, like, the Wolverines is like the logo. So they start throwing the graffiti everywhere. There was that earlier moment of the brainwashing going on where they're just showing kind of pictures and the words are coming up in a very Clockwork Orange kind of way. And then it said Friends, and Wolverines was graffitied on it. Nice cut here. We just had an intense action sequence. Again, genre set pieces, genre payoff. The preview is hinting that we're going to get Americans fighting against the forces. We're going to get this idea that these kids are going to take on an army, and there's going to be explosions. They're going to be winning. We're getting paid off on it. That's what we're exploring. And now that they have a real deal commander, someone who's actually trained, he can help make them stronger. So now we start to believe it more. How old's your wife? 80, so we have a nice kind of funny scene here. And they're playing football. What's more American than that? Even though there's this really stressful and unbelievable, surreal situation going on, there's still time to just take a break, be kids, do something social, something normal in the middle of all this. And Leah Thompson starts asking him personal questions. And he discusses how he met his wife, how much he loves her. It's kind of a hint that eventually this guy's going to die. And one of the ballsy things that this movie does is it kills off a lot of the characters. A lot of the Wolverines are going to die. And it's only fitting because they're heroes, right? They're fighting for a bigger cause. So it's a really gutsy call. That's taken them through December. They're making progress. They're fighting the enemy. It seems like they're about even within this town. The desolation of the landscape. Notice that earlier. The landscape shots here are important because, again, it's a metaphor for how the battle's going. And there's not a lot of green right now. Things seem pretty dark. Russia is known, of course, for its winters, for its almost year-round winters. It seems to always be represented by snow and big furry hats and a lot of vodka drinking. That's a big effect shot right there. 1 hour, 8 minutes, 37 seconds. Just the flames and the explosions here in the middle of the field. Now, that might not be all that great for the environment. There's something to be said for CGI if we want to go green. But watching that occur on screen as a live action explosion does the job, man. Makes it feel real. Makes it feel believable. And the whole point of making something believable is that we're tricked into thinking that we're there with these characters, and the emotions of what's going on become our emotions. Our bodies disappear. As the lights go down in the theater, we also kind of evaporate, and it's just our consciousness that's fused with the movie, and we now become one with it. We're in that world, we're in that environment, feeling what they're feeling. Movies are all about emotions. The reason this movie's remembered and Invasion USA isn't is because one is played as a drama set in an action movie, kind of in a fictional future what-if world. And the other one is played only as an action movie, only as a series of action set pieces with a character that's totally heroic, that's super heroic, that's beyond being human. There's really no exploration of his character, of the other characters. It's a little bit too distant in terms of the people that are in it. Even though, again, the notions of Invasion USA are really scary, really terrifying in a lot of ways. Great moment here, 1 hour, 11 minutes, 12 seconds. They're caught in a tank-to-tank battle, and at any moment, the American tank will unknowingly hit them because they're right under the enemy tank. And the sound of the cannons firing is captured really well, and we get that character saying, "I can't stand it." And it's a great moment. How do you fight against a tank? How do you get the people out of it? How do you take it out? From a screenplay structure, this is technically episodic narrative. We have the same characters undertaking small mini objectives. There's a large objective of defeat the enemy, get the Russians, get the communists out of their town. But you have to do that battle by battle. So the episodic nature comes into play within the big objective. Win the war, defeat the enemy is the big goal, but now it's win this battle. So we get these mini battles going on, and predictably they go pretty easily for these characters. And that's done to really set up the Act 3 climactic battle as the two brothers essentially sacrifice themselves and go right into the heart of the enemy territory and to fight the commanders and to take them out. Here we have the payoff of the setup of revealing the emotions of this pilot character, and now he gets shot. A character codename Aardvark died a few minutes earlier, and there was that great visual of him hanging on the cannon, and as it's turning back and forth, his lifeless body is just hanging on it. It's a sad scene as the two characters die. We know that their names will be immortalized on the rock, and then they get out just in time as the American tank has finally gotten his aim and takes it out. So tank sequence, so the tank episode. And they all run about 5 to 7 minutes or so. They're a beaten sequence long. The numbers start dwindling slowly. They're losing more and more of their Wolverine members. And that's a predictable thing, but it's also a good thing in terms of of expectations, and as we're watching, we don't want to feel like these people are invincible. We want to get the sense that they're essentially learning as they go. They're really unprepared for this, and they're being forced to do things they thought they'd never do. It's expected that these kids would eventually be taken out by a more well-prepared and reinforced, supplied army. Kind of wonder why the town isn't fortified over time. We're about 3 months into the war, and you don't get the sense that they're getting any reinforcements. So maybe the communists are stretched thin as it is. Action, reaction. Something takes place. There needs to be a consequence for it. Cause and effect. The pilot died, and in order for us to feel that loss, at 1 hour, 14 minutes, 50 seconds, they hold a funeral for him. They have his helmet kind of on a stick, and that helmet represents him, and they're all sorrowfully around it. The music is really nice. The music throughout has been a great balance again. Depending on what the scene requires, what's going on in the scene, what the emotions are, and how we, the audience, should connect to those characters in that moment, the music is hitting those chords really well. This is kind of a callback to Western movies, 1 hour, 15 minutes, 30 seconds as the two brothers sit on the hill here. We had the wide shot of them. One of the most iconic American images for film and for just Americana, being an American, is kind of the Wild West, is open spaces, hills, mountains, the prairies, kind of like fighting for our home, fighting to keep our home. This is kind of a political film in a lot of ways. There was a bit of a reaction to that in terms of the criticism of the film, that it was kind of pro-NRA. There was a bumper sticker earlier saying, "You can take my gun from my cold dead hands," or something to that effect. We jump to the next month, and now the enemy is holding marches and kind of military parades in the town, and the new badass commander is introduced. He's even meaner and a little more cliche than the previous guy. There's going to be a really interesting shot towards the end of the movie with the previous guy with the mustache. And a very humanizing scene. It's almost borders on the verge of parody, and it kind of sticks out. It's almost like there was another draft of the story where we focused more on the enemy and we had their side. That showed them being a little more human, but those scenes were cut out. But for now, we have a kind of remoralization of the troops here. They've been beaten down by the Wolverines, and the new commander shows up to say, "Hey, here's our suspects, here's what's going on. Here's my philosophy." From a screenplay point of view, the opponent of this movie has been mostly faceless and mostly, let's say, inactive. Basically, they've been doing enough to serve as an opponent. They've been present, but they haven't been very active in their focus of pursuing and destroying the Wolverines. An hour, 18 minutes, 19 seconds, when this commander arrives and serves as kind of the unifying force, as we're seeing in this hall, he's giving his speech. It's just funny that on the poster board in the back are like the yearbook pictures. We're battling high schoolers. We're battling the always feared students from the yearbook, the Wolverines. After the initial attack, and up until this point, they've basically served to just enhance the strength and position of the Wolverines. They've been there so that we can see that the Wolverines are getting stronger. They've been there so that the Wolverines could have something to fight, but it hasn't really become humanized and personalized. We haven't really felt the overall goal and the overall reasoning behind the enemy. We need to know what makes Darth Vader tick, Hannibal Lecter. We want to know their motivations. The more they talk about why they want what they want, the more we care about it. Either we care against them. If we hate somebody, it means we understand their position and we've decided to hate them. If we like somebody, if we're rooting for somebody, it means we've understood their position. We're deciding to be in favor of them. So the more we can understand the enemy, the more we can root against them. The more we can feel the impact of victory from the point of view of the Wolverines. One of the elements of the writing here is that the enemy, and like a lot of the Russian characters in a lot of the movies from the late 40s through the 80s, Russians became the default bad guy, most notably in the James Bond movies. Pretty much every enemy in those films has some kind of tie to the Soviet Union. It's easy to just say, okay, it's the Soviet Union, it's communism. So just whatever notions, whatever cliches we've already downloaded, we've already come to understand, let's just project those on these characters. What makes it really interesting and fun is to give us characters that go beyond our expectations, that shatter the stereotypes, that while keeping with the notion that they're the opponents, the persona of that, they take us beyond that. They humanize it and say, well, you know what? People in the Soviet Union had families and careers and dreams and fears, and they're just as human as anybody else. Everybody's a human being. We all have the same human desires. What starts to complicate it is when our beliefs don't agree. And then force comes into play, much like the earlier scene where Patrick Swayze battled for leader of the pack. They talk it first, and then they fight it out. One hour, 22 minutes, 8 seconds. They've captured one of the enemy. And this is an important moment because we have to have a scene like this. We have to have a scene where we go die, Yankee, die. Gorski, Stefan. No one gives a damn who you are. They're going to hurt him. There's interesting moments where compassion is shown against the enemy. It's important for the humanization to take place. Don't ever accept stereotypes and cliches as the standard. Always go beyond that. Always make the people we're supposed to hate more interesting than that. And here's a great little twist. A classic Cold War spy versus spy, counter spy, triple spy device. An hour and 23 minutes, 4 seconds. Daryl is the name of the same character who fought Patrick Swayze earlier, is revealed to have a bug on him. And the tears in Patrick Swayze's eyes, the torturous realization of what is going to happen to him now. He betrayed them. My father turned me in.
going back to the sins of the father who witnessed the murder of his townspeople, the mayor of the town who was supposed to protect people but had a tough choice. When there's a new power in town, what do? Do you die for your beliefs? Do you end your life? Or if you can survive, do you choose to do that but have to forsake everything? He included his son in a plan to take out the Wolverines. And it's interesting that we didn't see those scenes. We didn't see any of that take place because the importance was more on the surprise and this moment and keeping us on the same level as these characters in terms of what we know about the story. If we were to see scenes that happened without these characters that revealed secrets like that, we would now be ahead of our heroes, of the Wolverines. And we would feel a little bit of a disconnect from them. Now all of a sudden we're ahead of them and they're behind us. We should be taking this journey together. They shoot the Russian officer. Now, tough moment here. Interesting that this is done in a long shot the entire time. Long shots are good for establishing and for comedy. When you want to capture emotion, you have to go in for a close-up. Would have been interesting if we would have gotten that close-up of Patrick Swayze's face and then Daryl. C. Thomas Howell takes him out with the machine gun, and then great moment when he falls on him and they've got the white coats on and then the blood on his jacket. So there literally is blood on his hands. And how fast a friend can become an enemy. I always thought at this moment, great shot of Patrick Swayze there. Action, reaction, action, consequence, action, emotion. That's the humanization part. Shooting someone like this, shooting someone you've known, you've been friends with, you got to show that really puts a hole in you, that really does something to you. It would be unbelievable if everyone has to go through this and they remain the same person they were when it started. At the end, they better be changed. Hopefully, if you're putting characters through something as horrible as this, they're discovering elements of their humanity that they didn't know existed, good and bad. We get a fade. A fade is a tool that's used when the emotion of a scene is so intense and powerful that it still bleeds over into the next one. It's a great just visual way to say what this character was going through in that scene is continuing in this scene. Now, if we would have had a straight cut, it just would have felt abrupt. It would have felt too disconnected, too just, okay, it's over, he forgot about it. And now he goes to a picture of him with the dude who just died, who he was responsible for killing, even though he didn't pull the trigger, and a picture of them playing baseball. Picture of them as teammates before times got tough. Really kind of a classic American kind of thing, playing baseball. Baseball and football, what's more American than that, right? And just letting the emotions pour out, even though he says, don't cry, don't ever cry. Hour and 27 minutes, 20 seconds. He's having a hard cry, holding the picture up to his eyes. Drama plus genre. What makes us care about this movie and these characters and the actions they take and their eventual deaths are moments like those. Patrick Swayze's character really is the emotional anchor of the film. We don't really see Charlie Sheen's character affected in this way so much. There are moments like when their father got shot or when they visited him in the camp. We saw that he's crying, he's human, he's capable of emotions. Everyone has their emotional reactions and outbursts. Even Jennifer Grey isn't afraid to beat on their prisoner. So different characters have moments to express emotion, and it's important, but the main character that we really anchor to is the Patrick Swayze character. Everyone has the same objectives. The general definition of a main character in a film is the person who's the first to take action towards an objective and to continue taking action towards that objective. Since he is the leader of the Wolverines, we will sort of filter our experience through him, and everyone will tend to have the same reactions, but they will be individual in terms of how they react to the emotional stress on screen. But their pursuit of objective will be unified, and it'll be filtered through Patrick Swayze, their leader. Another episodic moment. So again, episodic storytelling is a series of small objectives. In this movie, it's a series of small battles that add to the larger objective, which ties into it. Defeat the enemy. So we defeat the enemy by exploding the tank, by freeing the prisoners. Here we're looking for food. This episode here is the time we looked for food and unknowingly took the box back, took the food back, and the enemy was able to track us, and then we fought the helicopter, and a lot of us died as a result. The episode when we weren't so smart. The Wolverines are really on top of their game and ahead of the enemy through most of the movie until this, where the boxes just kind of happened to fall off the truck. In the previous scene, you just discovered that they put a bug on someone in the team, so they're starting to change the strategy on how they fight the Wolverines. So maybe that didn't happen to just fall out. Maybe it was intentional. This moment here is kind of played again in Rambo 2 when he's literally fighting a huge Russian helicopter on his own. It's a very iconic moment in that film. It has its origins here in this one. They're all taking a break. They're all having a little goof-off moment. That's a nice moment when Jennifer Grey squeezing a little bit of the orange on Patrick Swayze's head. There's always time to be human, always time to have a little bit of lightheartedness. You can't take that away. You can't change that. It's not going to be gloom and doom all the time. You have to survive as a person. You have to keep your emotions balanced. Much like the weather, there has to be variation to it. Great sound work here. How the shots of you don't know the direction of where this helicopter is coming. There's some big, powerful, foreboding sound coming at them. And here we just have guns ablazing. Another team member is taken out, and we're sad to see her go. It emotionally affects us right away because of what's happened before. Again, the enemy here is mainly faceless. The only representatives that we get are those commanders. And we've heard them kind of give these just typical speeches, but we really haven't gotten to know why they care, what they think about this. So if you really want to balance it, when something happens to someone in the invading army, you cut to the commanders on the other side, and we get their reaction. It happened earlier a couple times, very quickly, where the guy with the mustache said, "I've never seen anything like this," and then they called in the big gun. We got the sense of his philosophy. He's a little bit colder. He's not as sympathetic as the other commander. But if we just had a couple more moments where those enemies were made a little more human, where they gave us moments and insight into why they care and why they want what they want, it would feel a little more balanced. And we would feel a greater threat from them. We're following the Wolverines from a writing point of view and making this a better movie, a more impactful movie. This movie isn't super respected in terms of a filmmaking kind of a critical point of view. Overall, the opinion towards it is positive, but I think the sensational nature of the amount of kills and the violence in it distract from what it's really successful at doing, is that it's developing its characters, it's trying to anchor everything in emotion, and it's just having this fun exploration of a speculative future world of World War III. This is a little bit silly and iconic, almost as if this kid had seen movies, had seen moments when the hero stands up and takes out a helicopter with only a machine gun, 1 hour, 35 minutes. And he's badly mistaken. He's taken out. If we would have seen the enemy give the order to send in these helicopters, or to taint the fruit, or to do something with a homing device to reveal the location of the Wolverines, we would have been ahead of them, and we would have lost that direct connection to them. By always being with them, we're constantly surprised, whether it's good or bad, along their journey in dealing with the opposition that they face. So while it was kind of an obvious setup, we had our suspicions much as they did, but they decided that the coast was clear. They went for the food, and now they're paying for it. Everyone's dying off. Nice scene here, hour and 36 minutes, 12 seconds, as Jed, a.k.a. Patrick Swayze, a.k.a. Johnny Boy, talks to Baby, a.k.a. Tony in this film, with an I. She's dying, and she doesn't want to die for nothing. She wants him to kill her. He can't do it. Give me a grenade. Just a great movie idea, and a heroic thing to ask for. She's going to take the grenade and take out one last bad guy with the remaining energy that she has left. She's a fighter till the end. Pull the pin for me. And this, again, is played as a dramatic moment. And it's not played overly serious. It's played just with the right tone. And every emotional moment is always filtered through Jed. Always Patrick Swayze is the emotional core of the film, while all the characters are, again, pursuing the objective together. We filter the emotions through him. He's really gone through the ringer, man. I mean, everyone's dying and he's just always going off and crying. It's sad, but it's real, and that's what connects us to it. Great shot there. She's holding it and she's breathing heavily. We got the blood there. Members of the team have been taken out. Feels like the enemy's getting stronger, but at the same time, they've been able to put up a strong opposition to them. We haven't gotten much reaction from the townspeople. That could potentially be something that would be added in the sequel. The way we could gauge progress would be getting some kind of info from the townspeople and having them say, okay, here's the latest news that's come in. What you're doing is making waves, and now reinforcements are being sent, or towns across America are following. The legend of the Wolverines has spread, and it's inspired more resistance. Then again, it would be dangerous for them to go into town because their pictures are probably everywhere. Everyone knows what they look like, who they are. So you'd have to establish some kind of connection, some kind of network of people who somehow get the message to them. In our age, again, we have phones and satellites, and if those are kept in the mix and not explained away, it would be pretty easy to do that. The nature of the resistance and the warfare should be very different in this remake than it was here. This is 1984, pre-internet, pre-computers, pre-all technology that we have now that was available in Walmart and Best Buy. Here we have her final act, the sound in the distance. Now we have the moment here with the super commander, the evil commander with the mustache. Everybody has a mustache. And then Patrick Swayze, Jed, writing the names on the stone. So again, a nice visual symbol of what that is and that they won't be forgotten. Looking over, great scenery. The snow is starting to recede. We're getting closer to hope. Tony Mason, Andrew Tanner. The new movie has to be inspired by this one. It's taken the name, even though it's illogically using it, and it has no immediate cultural impact other than a pop culture reference, not something that is naming the tension in the air. Red Dawn was the taking of that fear that everyone had and putting it into a title, putting it into a movie, filtering it through the characters. That's what this managed to do. What is the Red Dawn fear that we have today? It seems that it would be terrorism. Terrorism is the thing that is the most scary, the most prevalent thing on our minds when we think about enemies and invasion or forces or America being under siege. That's what happened. And in a post 9/11 world, that's the fear. It's not a 1984 fear. So adapt the idea and make it relevant. If it's just going to be a bunch of high schoolers or college students, I think all the actors here seem to be in their 20s, but let's say they're going to play seniors in high school or something. They're going to be in a small town, and they're going to resist the forces, and they're going to resist them with machine guns and hunting in the woods. While, again, so much new technology exists, it has to be adapted to what's going on today. It has to be made believable and exciting and surprising. So it should thrill us and shock us and make us uneasy, but in the end make us hopeful. It should give us a belief in courage, a belief in heroes. It should stir us much like this did. This ultimately becomes a patriotic film. It becomes a movie that's kind of put into that Rocky IV category, whereas Rocky IV was very cheesy when you look back at it compared to today's standards. This still has a little bit of an edge to it. Here's a scene I'm talking about from earlier. 1 hour, 42 minutes, 30 seconds. The original commander, before they brought in the super Russian guy, is writing a letter to his wife, and we're hearing his thoughts. Now, this could definitely be made fun of a lot. It's absolutely spoofable, laughable, if you want to take it in that direction, but I love the idea of it. I love what's trying to happen here, and I wish this would have happened earlier in the film, and this character would have kind of been the emotional anchor of the bad guys. Because this is totally human. This is absolutely making this guy a real character so that later, when he doesn't shoot Jed and lets him take his brother, his dying brother in his arms, to be buried, we connect with this guy. We believe that he wouldn't do that. We understand now that both sides are exhausted from this war. We understand that everybody has families on each side, that there's sacrifices being made for ideals, for beliefs. And having this guy long to just be rid of this war back in the arms of his wife or his loved one, it's an important moment. And just to include that earlier, what if that would have happened earlier? Every time you see this character on screen from that moment forward, you feel differently towards him. And you kind of actually want to know more about him. And when he takes action, you understand it. Why do we connect with characters like Michael Corleone or Scarface? Not to just focus on Al Pacino characters. They technically would be anti-heroes, right? Technically they're criminals. Technically they're the bad guy. But when you understand the bad guy's motivation, you understand the bad guy and he becomes human, and you connect to him and you look for the good. You kind of hope that they will realize what they're doing, and the good will become the pronounced part of their personality versus the bad. That's why we're fascinated with those types of characters. So anytime we get a chance to have a look inside of the opponent, It's a good thing. It was very out of place because it's not established earlier in the movie. It's a device that should be used from the beginning so it doesn't kind of almost shock us. I remember watching this when I was younger thinking, why are they cutting away from the action and giving us this soap opera moment? It could have been played with that same intention, but for a similar effect, but with a different outcome long term. It wouldn't have come off as so out of the blue and like, well, what is this about? The tone changes a little bit. And the reason it's done is because as a writer, as a director, Milius is saying, okay, how do we believe that this guy lets them go? It's really a symbol of both sides are exhausted, and it's time for us to just allow each other to be with our brothers, our families, our loved ones. What are we really fighting for? What is this about? We're tired. And that's kind of the final comment of the film. There had to be an emotional end to it. There had to be an emotional human end moment where both characters look at each other eye to eye. There was a movie with Louis Gossett Jr. and Dennis Quaid called Enemy Mine. And it's set in outer space. It's a sci-fi movie. And it's essentially an allegory for Russia versus America, where it's a human character and an alien, and they're on a planet stranded, and they spend their time fighting each other, trying to kill each other. And eventually they come to understand one another. So Enemy Mine, M-I-N-E. Really interesting movie. As a kid, it kind of was a little bit boring because I was expecting sci-fi action. But watching it again later on, you can appreciate the emotional, dramatic nature of it. It does have some cool sci-fi to it. It's almost like a stage play. It's just two characters in a location and emotional fighting going on. 1 hour, 47 minutes, 30 seconds. There he is. The writer of the love letter has the gun pointed at Patrick Swayze and Charlie Sheen. They're both shot. They're both dying. Great shot there of Jed looking at this guy. Lowers the gun, puts the hand out. Go ahead, walk away. The breathing, the breaths there, the smoke in the background. Great shot. Pretty much guaranteed that these reaction shots weren't filmed together. You just can feel that. Now, it's a little bit over the top here as he kind of looks at his hands as he drops the gun. And it's only over the top because we didn't get this character established more earlier in the film. And what Milius, as a filmmaker, as the writer of the story, wants to say about war, about the nature of the Cold War, about us versus them, that's a great moment. That's what he wanted to get to. It wasn't necessarily finessed enough because it's included only in the end. It's just kind of coming out of nowhere in a lot of ways. The way to balance that more is more emphasis on the opponents. Not on the opponents strategizing how to defeat the Wolverines, because again, that puts us ahead of the Wolverines, but on the emotional reactions of the opponents. So much like Jed here, someone dies. They had to kill Daryl. We cut to Jed by himself looking at a picture, crying really hard. So now we got to cut to the opponents having some kind of reaction. There's a balance that needs to be struck because the opponent in some sense could be thought of as weak if we see them too emotional, but I'm not really a believer in that. It all comes down to who the character is, and you have to have them having authentic reactions. Great shot there at 1 hour, 49 minutes, 25 seconds. The choice of this final resting place for Jed and his brother is important. It's a playground. It's a park bench. It is returning to childhood, returning to innocence, returning to simplicity. Being brothers, a place where they used to go and be carefree. Come on, Maddie. Daddy will be here soon. They're both dying. They're both tired. They need to rest. Love it's so cold. You could see the breath. I'll hold you as long as I can, Maddie. I'll hold you as long as I can. You can lean on me. I'm so tired. I'm so tired. Long shot, park, them in the bench on the distance. It's over for them. They've made the ultimate sacrifice. We cut to the survivors. They earlier made the decision to go on. Somebody had to carry on the memory. And it's going to be Leah Thompson's voiceover that's going to close out the movie. She's going to be reading the placard that is on the rock with all the names of the heroes that gave their life. Notice now the terrain and the season. Spring has come. We're free now. Close-up of her saying we're free, and we just know that it's going to end eventually. The war will end. The commander was tired. He let them go. He looked at his hands. I never saw the brothers again, and this time this war, like every other war, ended. So we don't really know how far we cut in the future. In the early days of World War III, they fought here alone and gave up their lives, so that this nation shall not perish from the earth. Very patriotic score right now. We see the pictures of each character, the actor. A lot of 80s stars here. But at this time, we as an audience wouldn't be thinking that. We've seen some of them in films, but by no means had anyone blown up into any kind of superstar. Just showing the members of the Wolverines is important because they're the ones that we went on the journey with. They're the ones that gave their lives in the story. So we want to see them one last time. And the music, again, just really hitting that patriotic note. It's patriotic and it's new. We've never really heard anything like this. It's obviously like military influenced, but it's a nice spin on it. And we just sit there thinking, okay, go America kind of thing. So this movie does a good job of doing that. But what it really tries to do is have that notion of what's the point of war at the end, that both sides get tired, that all wars end, that you have to stand up for what you believe in. The whole final assault with Jed and Maddie is kind of foolish, but on the other hand, sitting there, I believe that they would do it because the Wolverines had been so successful throughout. You just sit there and think, okay, they're going to make this happen. But of course, it's the new commander that takes them out. Would have been interesting to see that commander, the Russian one, with the one who wrote the letter. Their philosophies were very different. So there needs to be a scene where they're struggling with each other, where there's a dramatic moment, especially if the initial commander is being replaced because he's being viewed as incompetent or possibly too forgiving, too nice, as we get the sense that he does still have a heart. He's still connected to that humanity within him. He's not really excited to be at war. So there should have been a moment when that new guy came in where they fought with each other. Much like there was a scene earlier with the mayor in the town, there should have been that stress of giving command over, now having to be number two, and giving it to a guy who's more ruthless than you are. Now starting to question your role in this war. And as a human being, what are you doing? And if you're fighting for the dream of being in the arms of the woman you love, what's the cost? What's it going to take? That would just tweak it a little bit more. Again, it's a good movie. It's a fun movie for what it is. It succeeds in being this action film in a what-if world, what-if future World War III started. There are just tweaks here and there that could take it from being a good movie to a great movie. Is this kind of effort and analysis going to be put into the remake? Probably not, because there's no reason for it to be. Much like every film, what gets remembered in Red Dawn are the action sequences. Is the screaming of Wolverine, avenge me. The moments of them surprising the enemy and shooting them as they pop out of the ground, having dug these holes and killing them in the field. the ingenious ways that they unleash guerrilla warfare on an enemy that's more powerful than they are. But what really makes us care are these emotional moments, are these character moments. And in the 80s, director John Milius would have come from a school of 60s and 70s influence in terms of his writing and filmmaking, which was all character-based, all emotional, all in that style of small filmmaking. It starts with the characters and drama, and it's only later that genre starts to become such a major moneymaker. The science fiction film was always a B movie forever because the effects were nowhere near where they needed to be believable. The most believable thing filmmakers could accomplish would be humans on screen fighting for what they want with their words and emotions. So as the technology improved, the focus shifted towards the big visuals on screen, the payoffs of spaceships and explosions and morphing and whatever effects. And the drama now has dropped back, the thinking through of characters and what action, reaction, cause and effect, and the consequence, the emotional consequence for actions taken, that has become something lower on the scale of importance when creating films. Will the cast of the new film mimic the Stars of Tomorrow casting that went on in the original Red Dawn? Chris Hemsworth has become a star since then. Of course, he is Thor in all of the Marvel movies. But other actors like Josh Peck, Josh Hutcherson, Adrian Palicki, Isabel Lucas, Connor Cruz, Jeffrey Dean Morgan. I've heard of a couple of these. Maybe they're small enough stars now, and after this film they'll become more popular. Or what's more likely to happen is that this will be viewed as a remake, as a quick money maker, something familiar. We can go to the movies, kind of check out, well, what changes did they make? How did they make this more relevant or more powerful, different than the original? We'll check it out, but it's doubtful anybody's really going to stand out, because in the end, actors become stars because they play a character that is memorable. Each actor has the character that made him a star, the role that catapulted them into pop culture consciousness. Can we imagine that any of these characters in Red Dawn are going to be that memorable and that powerful? It's always possible, and I really hope that the director of the remake, Dan Bradley, who was a stunt coordinator and second unit film director on movies like Independence Day, Spider-Man 2 and 3, Bourne Supremacy, Superman Returns, Indiana Jones. He definitely has a resume of blockbuster filmmaking, and he's been around that process, so he's learned some things. But because he's not the writer here, the writer is Carl Ellsworth, known for writing Red Eye, Disturbia, and The Last House on the Left remake. If we combine those two backgrounds, where we're going from a writer-director, John Milius, who got his filmmaking education during the second Golden Age, and we compare that to the writer of Red Eye and Disturbia and Last House on the Left, with a filmmaker who will be competent, who's done the work over the last 15, 20 years, seen a lot of big films get made, who's going to be fine in terms of being a technical director. But when you combine these two, do they really have anything to say? Are they going to look at Red Dawn and understand, here's what created it, here's what that director-writer saw, here's what he sensed and during the time in 1984, and he decided to tell a story about what was going on in this kind of way with these characters, and here's the moral of the story, here's the message of the movie, here are the emotions of the characters. Is that kind of work going to take place here so that we can believe in these characters, we can feel along with these characters, but also it's going to be not just believable that it's set in this America in 2012, in some sort of other world what-if 2012, but at the same time, it's going to take enough of the post-9/11 world and ignore the Cold War world because it's gone and dead. And is it going to turn it into something thrilling, uneasy, exciting, and patriotic in the end? The potential is there. All that needs to happen is the work. Unfortunately, the level of work and the amount of passion put in are proportional to the expectations of box office. And if minimal effort is going to equal maximum profit because there's a marketable, nostalgic name on the title, and we, the audience, aren't going to demand more, then we shouldn't really expect more. So I'm hoping for Red Dawn to be fun and interesting and inspired, creative, and I hope it learns its lessons from Red Dawn and it understands what made that movie great, and it takes that myth, that cultural myth, and reinterprets it for us 28 years later so it helps to make sense of our current environment. That's what myths do. Provide some kind of sense, provide some kind of understanding for what's going on through storytelling. And that's all we can ask for. Good stories, inspired stories, creative stories, stories that care, stories that want to say something. And I'm hoping Red Dawn will do that.
Red Dawn is one of those movies that if you saw it as a kid in the 80s, you kind of have a warm place for it in your pop culture heart. Looking back on it now after our analysis, it definitely is an ambitious film in what it's trying to do, and as we've seen, it does it well enough and it tries to keep it emotionally grounded. The key for the remake will be to translate that into our current times, to make the myth accessible to us today, and to not be handcuffed by the genre expectations and the pop culture nostalgic references that we might want to seek as a savvy audience. It would have been great if the title would have been changed, but from a studio point of view, that would be a risk to the potential box office. Hopefully Red Dawn will be a surprise hit, it'll do some inventive things, and hopefully it'll become an example of how a remake can take the spirit of the original and make it work for our times. Given Hollywood's track record over the past few years for remakes, reboots, and sequels, I'm guessing this is going to really play it safe and not do anything too different. And as much as I want this to succeed and I want it to be a great film, I'm going in not really expecting anything special. What do you think about the analysis of the original Red Dawn? Agree? Disagree? And are you looking forward to the remake? Please share your movie passion in the comments section. Until the next movie night, which will be The Hunger Games, thanks for hanging out. Remember, StoryCorp gives us more of what we pay for, so let's choose our movies wisely. And as always, long live good movies.